What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. On today's list, we'll be covering 10 dark things soldiers refuse to talk about. Be it incredible survival stories, harsh living conditions, or worms that puke glowing bacteria, there's plenty to cover. And doing so today, I'm Taylor McWaters. Let's dive in. Number 10, Adrian Carton de Wiart. Over the course of 6 decades and 4 wars, Adrian Carton de Wiart survived the impossible multiple times. He's considered one of the most dedicated soldiers of all time because, well, for starters, after he lost his left hand and his left eye, Adrian did not retire. In fact, the British Army officer went on to experience 10 more horrible injuries afterwards. As World War I broke out in November 1914, Carton was serving with the Somalian Camel Corps, opposing the forces of the Dervish state. Now, he was shot in the arm and face, and that's how he lost his left eye, but a grim detail shared by Lord Ismay, who served alongside the soldier, said in 1964 that the doctor at the time couldn't do anything about his eye, so he must have been in pure agony during all of this. Lord Ismay continues to believe that losing his eyes was actually a blessing in disguise, because the incident allowed for Adrian to relocate to Europe, where even more action was waiting. He received more gunshot wounds in the head, hand, stomach, groin, leg, and ankle, and if that's not inspiring enough, he survived numerous plane crashes and a broken back. Number 9. Trench routine. During the more or less quiet moments of trench living, soldiers were attacked by snipers and shells still quite often. This was referred to as wastage. It's the reason 80 soldiers are killed in the trenches a month. Nighttime was of course the most dangerous, but also required the most labor. Soldiers would climb into no man's land to repair barbed wire or dig new trenches. Now, during the day, it was easier to spot oncoming attacks, sure, but at the same time, soldiers were busy with chores. They would be filling sandbags, repairing duckboards, all below the surface, all out of view, still from snipers. It was extremely uncomfortable. Number 8, the Night Witches. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment was assembled out of women only. They had trained for bombing missions, but back then the planes were nothing like they are today. You had bombs held to the wings with wire. These planes didn't have radio or radar, and that was so these women could sneak behind German enemy lines and complete around 15 to 18 missions a night. The Germans referred to them as Night Witches. And when Nadia Popova, who enlisted at just 19 years old, when her home was taken by German soldiers, her town was also destroyed, and in July 1942, when she was shot down, she met another pilot who was also shot down, who she later went on to marry. So even when the world's chaos, still some good things end up happening. Good, with a grain of salt, I say. Number 7, Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar is often referred to as the Liberator. He was born in 1783, and he was a military and political leader that led Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Panama to their independence from the Spanish Empire. He was 47 years old in 1830, and he had to resign from his presidency, and he was planning on heading to Europe. He even had already sent crates of his belongings beforehand, but sadly, he fell extremely ill before he was able to actually leave. On December 17th of 1830, he was moments away from the end, and at that point, humans become quite delirious, so his last words have stuck with many. Those last words were, "Damn it, how will I ever get out of this labyrinth?" Other accounts say his final words were, "Fetch the luggage, they do not want us here." Either way, whichever one is accurate, it sounds like Simon was sadly looking for a way out, even moments away from death. Number 6, training exercises. Murray Hudson was born in 1938. He was a sergeant with the Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. On February 13th, 1974, Murray was supervising a training exercise when one of the worst things that could happen, happened. One of the officers in training that day accidentally armed a grenade that he was about to throw, and the officer then froze out of fear. I can't even imagine at that point what that's like. Now, Murray saw this and he knew right away what had happened, so he ordered the soldier to just throw it. Sadly, the officer was still frozen in fear, so in an attempt to save him, Murray went over himself and tried to release the grenade so that he could maybe throw it. Now, during this process, the grenade unfortunately exploded, which took out both of the men. Now, Murray was awarded the George Cross after his passing, which is the highest award bestowed by the British government for gallantry not in the presence of an enemy. Number 5, Lady Be Good. Back in 1943, a crew of 9 left Libya aboard the Lady Be Good. They left to complete a bombing run, but the harsh Sahara sandstorms forced most of the planes in that run to turn back and land. But not the Lady Be Good. She continued on for a while, but then eventually the crew decided to turn around and head back. But after that point, the crew and the plane were not seen until 1958. That's when British geologists found the remains, and then they were able to piece together the crew's last moments. They flew past the base, subsequently ran out of fuel, had to parachute into the desert, and while the plane crashed. From there, they decided to travel northwest for about 111 miles. They didn't make it during this hopeful trek, but if they'd gone the opposite direction for just 16 miles, they would have found the Lady Be Good, which was in better condition than any of them realized. Co-pilot Lieutenant Robert F. Toner kept a diary while they walked in the desert, and when it was found alongside his body, one of the final entries said, "Still waiting for help, still praying." Number 4. Hopeful last moments. While it's hard to hear that last diary entry of those who were left alone in the desert, we have to look at what it was like at the end of your life mid-battle. Sir Philip Sidney was born in November 1554, and he was an English poet and soldier and is one of the most prominent figures of the Elizabethan era. In 1586, he joined Sir John Norris in the Battle of Zutphen in the fight against the Spanish, but it was during this battle that he was shot in the thigh, which would ultimately lead to his death. One of the most well-known stories now about Sir Philip Sidney is when he was lying there wounded next to another soldier also wounded. He spoke his last words to that soldier and he gave him the rest of his own water. He said, "Take it, thy need is greater than mine." It seemed like these stories have a similar theme, that in the very last moments of your life, even if you know you're not going to make it, you put others' life before yourself. That's a life lesson to take home, folks. Number 3. Glowing aid. The Battle of Shiloh was one of the worst during the Civil War. 3,000 had met their fate while 16,000 others left injured. The wounded were so weak from traveling and not getting any proper rest that the infections that they had been living with at that point were starting to really take a toll on their well-being. Medics during this battle were completely overwhelmed. During the night hours, something odd happened and their wounds began to glow. Yeah, they called this the angel's glow, and if you had this glow, your survival chances were much higher. We found out why later on in 2001. The glow came from parasitic worms called nematodes who vomit bacteria, a glowing bacteria. That bacteria fights infections, so now we fully understand. Number 2. No man's land. I mentioned trench life earlier in this list, so naturally I have to expand on the patch in between those two trenches, no man's land. The Smithsonian says that there were tales circulating around those trenches over time, and apparently deserters lived in no man's land from both sides. They were said to dig tunnels deeper and deeper in the middle, and only at night would they come out to scavenge off of the dead. These tales began around 1920, when a British cavalryman, Arthur Holm Beeman, wrote about those German prisoners who would seemingly disappear into the trenches with other deserters. His officers then told them there won't be a search party because no living man shall be sent into the ghouls among the moldering dead. And finally, number 1. Interrogations. We'll finish this serious list off on a rather positive note. Hans Scharf was living in South Africa with his family, but when he visited Germany, that's when the war broke out. He then was drafted, but his wife convinced a general to not put him at the front lines, but instead with interpreters. After a handful of mistakes and these wild coincidences, Hans became the lead interrogator for the Allied pilots felled in France and Germany. His methods, though, changed history. When he was younger, he witnessed a prisoner get abused, so from that day on, he vowed to never do the same. So later on down the road, his interrogation methods revolved around using kindness and friendly banter. His method has been studied since, and it works even better. This way, whoever is on the other side leaks more information and nobody has to break any fingers. Once the war was over, Scharf testified against the Germans, moved to the States, and began a new career as a mosaic artist. His work is currently on display in Cinderella's castle at Disney World. And no, I'm not kidding. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Those were 10 dark things soldiers refuse to talk about. Hey, if a part 2 is something you're interested in, let us know in the comments section down below, and we'll do the rest. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters. Keep on being you, and we'll see you next time on Most Amazing Top 10. Peace.